I cannot wait to dive into these 4 comics because they are freaking fascinating.
Live from the Talking Joe Studios, it's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe Weekly Podcast. Talking Joe's there. Talking Joe thought we would last. Talking Joe is there. Find each other like a married couple. Our podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there.
Talking Joe is the code name for a completely untrained special podcast force. Its purpose, to produce a regular comic review show while breaking and replacing a series of presenters from across the world.
Talking Joe. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. We are on our soapbox. Nobody seems to care. Fighting for fandom wherever there's trouble. The podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the best and longest running dedicated G.I. Joe comics podcast. If you're new to the show, you can find out all of the details over at the website, which is talkingjoe.co.uk. Today we are continuing our look at the G.I. Joe Disavowed era, the Devil's Due run, and we are talking G.I. Joe Frontline, issues 1 to 4, The Mission That Never Was, from Devil's Due back in 2002. It is the arc that marks the comeback from Larry Hama to the G.I. Joe property after about 8 years away. Now, without further ado, let's introduce my co-hosts. On point, it's a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners.
Hello, Tim. You sound like you're in a room that's got good soundproofing.
I am visiting my brother. This is so in June, we went to see my wife's family, and now we're seeing my family. I'm in Maryland, both near Baltimore and near DC. I'm in my brother's basement where he watches movies, and it is set up for good sound.
Excellent. So on the trip back, then you review your visit and mark it out of 10.
It's great so far. It's seeing a bunch of family. We're seeing a special movie tonight.
I get it. Say no more. And here comes the tail end, Charlie. It's G.I.J. It's Jay Cordray.
Howdy, Joe fans.
Hey, Jay.
What's happening, Mark? What's happening, Tim? You guys ready to talk some Joe?
I'm always ready.
Always ready.
I have so much to say about this first arc of Frontline.
So this is the first time that us three got together since... actually, it's not, but...
since our highly successful interview with Josh Blayock.
Yeah, let's pretend it is. Yeah, it's the first... it's the first time, for sure. Yeah, great to get the feedback from Josh.
That was really nice.
Yeah, he said it's his favorite interview ever. So that's lovely to hear.
Hey, we should add that in our tagline where you say the best and longest running G.I. Joe podcast. That's also the favorite interview by Josh Blayock.
Yeah.
Might be a little long.
For Disavowed, right? His tagline could be like, my favorite G.I. Joe interview I've done, Josh Blayock. And we could make it seem like he's listened to all of our Disavowed episodes and that he's endorsing the entire run of our Disavowed episodes as opposed to the episode where we spoke with him.
And also endorsing our opinions on every issue.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know how that's going to go over.
Yeah. The problem might be is that Joshua enjoys that episode so much that he goes and seeks out every single review that we've done of the Disavowed era and then starts crying.
I'll put in a plug to our listeners.
And then that Twitter gets retracted.
I retract my previous endorsements.
To our listeners, if you only listen to our regular episodes and you don't watch the videos, live stream where we look at art, or listen to the special episodes where we do extra interviews, do not miss the episode where we interview Josh Blayock. I'm not just saying that because I'm 1/3 of the people doing the questioning. it was a really good episode. Super interesting. I'm so glad to have been a part of it. And if you're a G.I. Joe comics reader, this is something that you want to have listened to.
I think one of our comments on possibly YouTube summed it up the best. He said something like, he learned all kinds of stuff he never knew he needed to learn about that era. And, you know, and it just really got a lot out of it. I think a lot of people got a lot out of it. I know I did. So like you said, it was really cool to get to hang out and talk to Josh, and, you know, also for him later to say it was a good interview for him too. So
we should spend the next 2 hours talking about how great our previous episode was, rather than I'm less interested in talking about Frontline 1, 2, 3, and 4 than about how great a previous episode of our show was. Should we just keep doing that?
Yeah.
wow.
And then, guys, are you've both seen Snake Eyes? You want to give us a little bit of reaction, spoiler-free reaction, and you're heading out again to go see it a second time, so can't have been too bad.
Tim, I'll let you go first.
Lots of fun. Saw it opening night with the missus, some of my employees, some friends, and am doing my due diligence as a G.I. Joe fan. Tonight I'm taking my wife again, my brother, his girlfriend. My brother likes G.I. Joe and likes movies, but he doesn't go see movies in the theater. He waits for them at home. So this is a special event for me.
Cool. And Jay?
I went a couple days. I think I went Tuesday at the like a noon showing or something, and there was me and like a group of 5 people in the theater. So that was really nice. It was quiet. Got to hear everything and see everything. Actually, they did have the lights were still turned on in the theater, almost to the credits. And you know, I was sitting there thinking, okay, they'll dim these eventually. And finally, one of the people from the other group went and told them to turn the lights down, and they did turn the lights down. I came in. I told Mark I came in just a few minutes late, but I did catch the very beginning scene, so I didn't really miss anything there. I enjoyed it. I really, really went in thinking that I wasn't going to like it. I was expecting to actually come home and write a scathing review, which I would probably then delete as soon as I posted. But I ended up liking it. It's completely different. That's all I'll say is this is a different character. It's a different story, and you just got to go with that. Henry Golding is so likable, even in parts when he shouldn't be likable. You're just like, I can't not like this movie because this guy is so likable. And Andrew Koji as Storm Shadow, same thing. He was excellent. Very good, very good.
I saw Larry Hama posted a brilliant thing today, which is it's not your Snake Eyes, it's my Snake Eyes.
Yeah, it was good. Like I said, I went Tuesday. I'm going, like Tim, I'm going again tonight, taking the kids to go see it tonight. So hopefully we can, and including even one little kid. So hopefully, you know, we'll try to spread that love and help the franchise and grow it to new fans.
For our listeners wondering why we haven't talked about it more thoroughly on the show, Mark, of course, is in the UK. The movie has not been released there yet, and so we can't have a fair review, the three of us, until all three of us have seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I already feel like we've probably spoiled a little too much. I don't want to say too much to ruin anything for Mark.
I've probably done my fair share of spoiling by looking at some of like the trailers and little mini featurettes and things. So
and just seeing people's comments on Facebook was why I went Tuesday and didn't wait until this weekend, because I was I have to go. You know, there's just, you know, because of the show and everything else, I'm on Facebook at least a couple times a day just checking stuff. And you know, how do you not see stuff? So I had to go see it, and I just for my own curiosity, I wanted to go see it.
Now that we've talked about the movie without talking about the movie, should we talk about how great our interview with Josh Blayock was?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we, Mark, do you have an opening thing for Frontline? I so want to talk about this arc.
Yeah, let's do it.
We're gonna talk about comics from Devil's Due. It's something you wondered if Talking Joe would ever do. I guess we'll explain it all to you. Gonna take some time to read the books we've never read. Oh.
Frontline!
This is Frontline, issues 1 to 4, October 2002 to February 2003. This was released around about the same time as the Malfunction arc. So issues 11 to 14 were the issues from the main series that was running in parallel with. Story, Larry the Man Hama. Pencils, Dan Jurgens, that guy from The Death of Superman. Inks, Bob Layton and Scott Hanna. Colors, Hi-Fi Color Design. Letters, Dreamer Design. Edits, Scott Whirl. And graphic design, Mike Norton. So, should we look at some covers first?
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
So, covers 1, 2, 3. The main covers are by Dave Dorman. We've got, which we'll talk about a bit more in a bit. We've got issue 4 from David Michael Beck. That's Storm Shadow jumping, sword aloft, with the large head of Baroness in the background, capturing the moment that she stood on some Lego. And then we've got some variant covers as well. Issue 1, cover B from Kevin Sharp, and issue 1, Dynamic Forces retailer exclusive, also from Kevin Sharp by the looks of things, unless I've written that down wrong.
So I'm going to start in an unusual place and then go to a familiar place. The cover for 1B by Kevin Sharp and John Larter is the Joes from this story arc coming at you, the Cobra characters from this story arc, and sort of a billowy explosion behind them, and yet very smartly the entire background is dark red, and several of the further back characters are knocked back in red. This is a little bit of a movie poster where you've got characters together in full body action and then some heads and shoulders around them. What's really striking to me about this cover is that Kevin Sharp, who is not a comics artist that I have tracked very much, but he's done a little art for G.I. Joe here and there. Kevin Sharp here, to me, looks like he's looking at Brandon Peterson from like 1996. And at that time, Brandon Peterson was definitely looking at Michael Golden from like 1993. Mm-hmm. And so subtly in some of the inking here, particularly on the left side, there's, I think it's Hawk all the way on the left, and then I'm not sure who it is. Juggler, I don't know if it's supposed to be a juggler. Okay, someone behind Snake Eyes' hand. The inking on those faces looks to me like Michael Golden. Mm-hmm. Not that he did it, but that's the reference. But the really exciting part about the regular covers for 1, 2, and 3 is that Dave Dorman already had an association with G.I. Joe. He had painted covers for the quarterly G.I. Joe magazine that was published by Welsh around 86, 87. And he had done a bunch of paintings internally for Hasbro for presentation, for people in Hasbro pitching figures, people in R&D pitching the figures along with marketing to the higher-ups, to the vice presidents. There are some on my website, A Real American Book. Just do a search term for Dorman. But this is for all of Dave Dorman's comics work, right? He's known for painting a lot of Star Wars covers for Dark Horse. He had a creator-owned special that he painted the cover, and I can't remember if he drew or painted the interiors around 2001. For all of this association with G.I. Joe and comics, he had never painted a G.I. Joe comic image. And so these 3 covers, just for that association, is really exciting. I love his texture on Destro's helmet for issue 2. I love seeing these familiar characters with this familiar but unfamiliar brush under Dorman. At the same time, I think his compositions could be a little stronger. It looks like these wannabe magazine covers with a lot more room for type. There's a lot of negative space around the characters on 1 and 3. And I'd also like the covers to be a little more specific to the issues. But super exciting, good paintings. Great to see these characters by Dorman's hand.
Yeah, I remember when they were coming out, I was very excited to see Dave Dorman covers featuring, on the covers here, having seen his work on particularly Star Wars Dark Empire, and that sort of really nice painterly pedigree, on a GI Joe cover that up to this point hasn't seen an awful lot of covers done in that style, really. Sort of David Michael Beck aside, who's on cover 4. Yeah, one of, I think, the highlights definitely for me at the time was seeing these covers on the book, and a good way of generating some additional excitement as well about the launch of the new series.
Absolutely agree. Always been a fan of Dave Dorman. A big fan, actually. I met him a couple times, got him to sign a bunch of Star Wars and Alien stuff for me. So yeah, it's really nice seeing his work here. Like Tim said, there's some rough spots, but I just love his textures and stuff. Seeing anything from him, especially around this period, just puts me in mind of those Dark Empire covers. What's interesting to me about the Frontline series, just when we're looking at the front covers, is that they went with that logo, with the stars and kind of the embossed look all over the whole thing. That was interesting.
Yeah. That's
Right, the
the
toys.
logo from the toy line in 2003. And I think this is a smart decision. I think from a brand management, brand identity perspective, I think it's a little confusing, but I think it's also a smart decision, so that if you're flipping through a box of comics at a comic book store, and you're only seeing the top of the covers flipping through with your index fingers, even without the word Frontline at the top of these covers, because it's on the bottom, you can tell immediately that these G.I. Joe comics are somehow different from the main Devil's Due series. I'm old-fashioned, and I think that despite the sort of modern rules of logo branding, I love the original G.I. Joe Special Missions logo from '87, where Special Missions is very big and it's all at the top. If you were to launch that book now, you'd have G.I. Joe take up the top quarter, and you'd put Special Missions very small under it, or like these Frontline covers, all the way on the bottom. And as a person who both has filed comics in a comic book store and also a person who has looked for back issues in other comic book stores, it's a little hard when you're flipping through back issue bins to figure out which G.I. Joe series is which if the spin-off title, the subtitle, is all the way on the bottom. It also adds a compositional element that the cover has to contend with, where the artist already knows that the top third or the top quarter is, don't put anything important up there. But those are sort of the rules, right? In 2003, you make the G.I. Joe logo really big and important, and it's G.I. Joe, Antarctica, or G.I. Joe Outer Space Missions, or G.I. Joe Classic, whatever it is. Just
And
put that
curiously
on the bottom,
enough,
I guess.
they only take this starred logo as far as issue 5. With issue 6, they revert to G.I. Joe: A Real American Hero, looking very much like the main book with the front line on the bottom. So less of a signifier to help you as you're flicking through the long boxes without pulling them out and double checking what's at the bottom of the cover, unfortunately.
That's one of those questions that I would like to ask Josh Blayock or someone else who was at Devil's Due at the time. That why did the logo change for issue 1? Why did it change back after issue 5? That I can imagine
Exactly. Yeah.
no one really remembering. That's a question that I want to ask, so I know I tried, and then I'd have to be satisfied that I probably wouldn't get an answer. And also, I feel like we could guess. Like, someone at Hasbro was probably like, no, use this logo because it's for the toys, and we're trying to sell the toys. And then someone else said, it should look like the comics.
It's over designed. There's surface upon surface, every little, the outline, the red outline. There's a red outline around G.I. Joe. Inside the black outline, and all of those are beveled. The star has, different planes. It's just too busy. We don't need all that stuff for the G.I. Joe logo. G.I. Joe logo is perfect. It's like Coke or Pepsi or I Love New York. It's don't touch it. You don't need to.
There is. I agree that it's a more active logo than I need for G.I. Joe. I appreciate that for the roughly 2003 toy line. If they felt the need to change the logo, they didn't go further than this. I do like that this does solve a problem, because if you're going to have the red, white, and blue stripes shooting from the E, You either need them to go all the way off the image, off the cover, off the package at the right side, or you have them end, and when that happens, that always looks bad. And with these stars, it has a reason for the stripes to end, and also by having the stars offset from each other, it creates some dynamism. The white stripe, the white star has gotten a little further, and the stars are smartly italicized, the same as the 5 letters. And you know me, I don't like it when the 5 letters of G.I. Joe are not italicized at the same angle as the subtitle, A Real American Hero. And wouldn't you know, this subtitle here in yellow, A Real American Hero, A, too small, B, to Jay's point, just take it out, not necessary. C, not italicized at the same angle as the 5 letters above it.
You just look at this stuff sometimes, and like I said, it's, somebody spent at least an afternoon on that. And you just don't need to. You don't need to.
How do you guys feel about the cover to issue 4?
I love it. Really, really like it. I don't know what it has to do with the story at all, but as far as a piece of artwork, I love it. That's probably my favorite Beck painting.
Yeah, it's nice, and it captures the anguish of standing on a Lego brick, as I say.
Yeah, she's got it.
She's nailed it.
I'm a little sad that Dorman was didn't do all 4
exactly.
just for uniformity. But for Plan B, the guy who's now like the sort of the new G.I. Joe painter that everyone knows, who Devil's Due already has a relationship with, that's a good.
I think now that I look at this,
B.
that it does have something to do with the story, because look at all the focused electricity behind her head. I think that's kind of an implication towards their brainwave scannering that's been going on.
Could be, couldn't it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've always assumed she's laughing like a villain, but in this moment, I'm thinking she's being zapped by the brainwave scanner and she's feeling anguish.
Something.
Or something.
Yeah.
Let's jump to the insides. Oh, you know what? Wait, sorry. Can we just for a moment talk about the back covers?
What's on the back covers?
Aren't they just kind of...
Are they close-ups of the interiors?
Yeah. So all 4 back covers are blow-ups of portions of panels drawn by Jurgens and then Layton or Hannah, and cropped in dramatic ways. And I think it's a Photoshop filter, but it's supposed to look as if it is a close-up scan of a printed page, such that you see the Ben-Day dots, the color dots of printing screens. And then on the bottom, there's the indicia for Hasbro. And this is a different treatment. In the main series, we're getting new art that costs money from David Michael Beck. We're not getting an ad for Image books that are, you could get otherwise. We're not getting ads for other Devil's Due stuff. This is just a small artistic statement. It's just a little bit of graphic design. It's really nice flourish. It's only the bad guys. It's Storm Shadow, Destro, Cobra Commander, and Baroness, and I really like it. And I wish that the current IDW issues would do something like this, because the current IDW issues have really boring back covers. It's just black with the G.I. Joe logo on it. Like, give me some art. Just redo a panel from inside, do 2 panels from inside in black and white, do the cover smaller without the color, do something like this, blow up a panel. So, all right, Jay, plot breakdown.
The year is 1995. The Jugglers have disbanded the G.I. Joe team and mothballed the pit, but not before handing General Abernathy, codenamed Hawk, one last mission. The Joe team has been tasked with transporting a targeting module for Joel Colton's particle beam from Utah to New York City. In Washington, D.C., a Cobra agent plants a bug in one of the Jugglers' hats, allowing Cobra Commander to find out the true use of the targeting module. With the new module, the particle beam projector can be used for long-range brainwashing. Cobra launches an attack on the train now carrying the Joes and the targeting module, but the Joes are able to defeat them. Zartan and the Dreadnoks destroy the tracks in front of the train, causing it to derail. The Joes escape the train on a pair of Ostrakers. Hawk is wounded in the firefight and Duke takes command. Reaching the Georgia coast, the Joes hitch a ride to New York City on a patrol boat from a fellow Vietnam veteran. Destro catches up to the Joes, but Hawk calls General Colton, who shoots Destro's Condor with the particle beam projector. However, Destro catches up with the Joes when they arrive in New York City, attacking them at the docks. Destro manages to escape with a targeting module for the particle beam projector. The Joe team follows Destro to his castle in Transcarpathia, while the other Joes lay down cover fire and a tomahawk. Snake Eyes and Scarlet wage a full frontal assault on the castle and an All-Striker. Destro blasts the All-Striker to bits with his wrist rockets. The other Joes pick up Scarlet and the tomahawk, but Snake Eyes is left behind, seemingly unconscious. Storm Shadow realizes the Joes are using Snake Eyes as a Trojan horse and leads the other Cobras to find his body, but it's too late. Snake Eyes is in the castle. Snake Eyes discovers the location of the targeting module and marks it for General Hawk. Snake Eyes then uses the castle's defenses to clear a path for the other Joes. Storm Shadow attacks Snake Eyes and the two fight at the gates of the castle. Hawk calls Joe Colton, asking for a laser to shoot down the targeting device, but the jugglers try to stop Colton. Jane and Joe attack the jugglers and fire the shot. Destro realizes the Joes may try this and moves the console, making the laser miss. Following Cobra Commander's order, Destro plugs the console into the computer system. Back in New York, Colton finds out the whole mission was a setup. The targeting module was just a device to deliver a virus into Cobra's systems, and the Joe team has once again been used as pawns by the jugglers.
So I'm curious, which of you have read this before? Because I read it when it came out. I was super excited before it came out. I reread it coincidentally a year ago, and then I forgot it, and I have read it for this episode. Mark, had you read this before?
Yeah, I read it as it came out. Like you said, Return of Larry Hama, super excited at the time. I remember feeling underwhelmed at the time, but haven't read it since. So yeah, it's almost 20 years on since I last read it, I think. And yeah, was quite excited to come back to it, rediscover it for the first time and see, how my reaction was coming to it without really a very strong memory of what it was. So
I hadn't read it before. This was the first time for me. I guess I'm kind of with Mark. I was a little underwhelmed. There are spots of it that I thought was really good, and I think that it's interesting that Larry had 4 issues to tell this story. Compare this 4 issues to Reinstated, how much stuff Blaylock tried to cram in 4 issues there. But this was a much more focused just on this one mission. So I think that helped a lot. It flowed really well, but there were some things that I really didn't like about it. We'll kind of get into those, but just off the top, this is the first time for me and kind of underwhelmed.
So to set the scene a little bit, it's 2002. I have read the first 2 arcs of The Devil's Due Run, right? As we keep reminding our listeners, I didn't like issue 1, and I have a letter printed in issue 3 stating that fact. And as much as I love the Mike Zeck covers for the second arc, the story left me less interested. So I dropped the book, and I can't remember if I read Malfunction or not. But with this arc, I thought, oh, they're correcting their mistake, right? They should have hired Hama to write the continuation of the Hama series. Maybe if this arc does really well, they'll get him to do some other stuff. But I am A, certainly on board for these 4 issues, and B, interested in where this series goes after Hama, because it's going to be rotating teams, of writers and artists doing, 2 or 3 issue arcs, and they won't have to sort of work necessarily in the current Devil's Due continuity, so I can just enjoy them on their own, right? If you don't love Batman and Detective Comics in 1989, you can read Legends of the Dark Knight, because that's these self-contained arcs. The other thing that made me excited about this, besides the return of Hama, is that it was going to maybe fill in some important gap after issue 155. What I didn't realize is how much of this was going to be sort of headed toward Devil's Due issue 1. And the other thing that was super exciting about this, which I still feel in rereading this, even if it's not my favorite G.I. Joe arc, Dan Jurgens drawing G.I. Joe is such a good fit for me. So Dan Jurgens had drawn for DC since the, I believe, early 80s. If not early 80s, certainly mid 80s, right? He drew Blue Beetle. He comes on to Superman after the John Byrne era is over, although that continuity was continuing, right? Jurgens writes and pencils Superman from, I don't know, roughly issue like 30 or 40 to like, I forget, 200 or something, 150, right? And Jurgens, though he was a DC guy, he draws in what I would consider a very pleasant, recognizable, this is not an insult, this is a compliment, like middle of the road, Marvel House style, circa 1985, American adventure style. It looks like Bob McLeod. I don't mean Bob McLeod inking G.I. Joe. I mean Bob McLeod like penciling New Mutants, Bob McLeod's 3 issues of Spider-Man. It looks like Bob Layton. It looks like Ron Wilson. It looks like Ron Wagner. It looks like Mark Bright. Dan Jurgens, though he's known for superhero stuff because of Superman, and then also like Blue Beetle or Booster Gold, right? If I said Blue Beetle before, I meant Booster Gold. And even though Jurgens is known for superhero and not sort of realistic action, his shapes, his proportions, his acting, his storytelling, it just feels like it's like he should have always been drawing G.I. Joe, right? Like I can imagine a world where you show a bunch of Dan Jurgens comics to someone who likes Ron Wagner and they don't really know artists and they're like, oh, that's Ron Wagner. So I was really excited that Bob Layton is inking it, right? So here's a guy, Layton, who is very much a Marvel 80s like house style guy, right? For writing, co-writing, and also inking a lot of Iron Man, and in some cases penciling and inking a lot of Iron Man around the Mark Bright run, right? So a sideways G.I. Joe connection. Having him ink is really exciting. When he leaves after 2 issues, Scott Hanna, I think, learned to ink from John Romita. I remember reading that in a Marvel magazine once, but he'd been around doing a lot of Marvel work. And then Hi-Fi Design is doing the colors, and by this point I don't like their colors on the main book, but they do something really fascinating here. They color all of the characters and the vehicles with just sort of 2 colors or 3 colors, like a base color, a shadow, and a highlight. And then it's the backgrounds and the effects, like smoke and explosions, that have a lot of highlights and rendering. So this should have really, really worked for me. And my top down, both from 2002 and also now, is that it doesn't quite work.
Thanks, Tim. That's I think spot on summary of kind of what I think was playing through my mind as well, sort of my sort of reaction to this, the Dan Jurgens art and that sort of muscular arts style to it, very superhero-y and not too far off, quite modern Ron Wagner, particularly as we've seen him more recently in the IDW ARA books. And yeah, very much looking forward to it. So much of it felt like it should work, but not quite hitting the high notes that we all hoped for. There's a lot there that seems sort of very designed to trigger a certain kind of nostalgia there, or kind of almost serve as a greatest hits, in terms of the characters that we're seeing getting in, Destro, Baroness, Storm Shadow. We've got Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow facing off. We've got some callbacks to some favorite vehicles here and there, but it not, despite all of that, it not necessarily all coming together. And I think I've got a good idea as to why that is.
I think Larry Hama has told us why that is. But Mark, if you've got it, this is the like elephant in the room of G.I. Joe Frontline 1 through 4.
Yeah, so I've got the quote from Larry, which I've extracted from an interview he gave on a site called Zaki's Corner. And I think the high level is that he didn't necessarily enjoy the experience of writing this and the sort of editorial control that was exercised here. So he says, most comic book companies, they want to tell you what the next whole arc is. Oh, what's the next 4 issues? Which is what they did to me at Devil's Due. They said, we want you to submit this for the summer, another 4 issues. And I said, I can't do that. And they said, well, then you can't do it because that's how we got to work. And I said, but that violates completely my methodology for doing the stories. Those were like probably the worst 4 issues I ever wrote because I had to write this outline and was stuck forcing these characters into that plot. And at times they didn't want to do it. The characters just didn't want to do it. So I think it's this style of dictating the story up front for the solicits and to get the editorial agreement, and then following that plot doggedly rather than letting the story take the author from page to page naturally. And I think going against the grain, not necessarily enjoying that writing experience as he went along. And I think that probably comes through in terms of how then we as the reader experience it. And there's just seems to be something slightly out of kilter that he's kind of going by the numbers to follow this plot rather than really have a deliver a story that would be in the classic mold of Larry Hama.
I would have enjoyed the story a lot more if not for like one particular thing. And I'll just say that right now. Least favorite character in the entire Devil's Due continuity is Scarlet, which is ridiculous because Scarlet is one of my absolute favorite characters. She's so terrible in here, and I feel like they told Larry, do this with Scarlet. You gotta work us toward this. It felt so unnatural. Everything. I'm just like, this is Larry writing Scarlet this way. Oh, if you cut all that stuff out, cut those two out completely. Cut out Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. Cut all three of them out. Then I would enjoy this a lot more. This would get a higher rating for me, minus my favorite characters.
Yeah, my next bullet on my notes was actually exactly the same thing, that Scarlet's writing just doesn't come across as it being a normal way of Larry writing Scarlet. It's the kind of the henpecking Scarlet that we saw
terrible
in the Josh Blayock Devil's Due. She says a couple of times almost exactly the same dialogue. She says, "This is." You hear my dog?
Are you sure that's not your
maybe.
wolf cubs in
That's
the
the
cabin
ghost
that
of
you've
Timber.
expanded in your backyard?
Timber. Rip. Scarlet henpecking. This is our last mission, Snake Eyes. We're gonna retire to our cabin, add in a few rooms, put in plumbing. We're gonna have a life. So this is setting up breadcrumbs, I think, for the later Devil's Due stories, and sort of trying to have a bit of a dotted line as to why Snake Eyes freaked out and jilted Scarlet at the altar. I guess that that dream of indoor plumbing was just too much for him.
Yeah, it was because of Scarlet in this arc. He said, "I'm not living with that for the rest of my life. I'm done. I'm out here."
So Mark's quoting of that Hama interview and the context there was helpful and spot on. And I think it's worth sort of saying this sentence one more time explicitly. When Hama writes, he makes it up as he goes along. So he doesn't write page 17 until he's finished page 16. And I think generally, occasionally, yes, he knows sort of halfway through an issue how the issue ends. But he really is just making it up as he goes. And he's not like concepting an issue and then going back to page 1 and filling it in. He's not concepting an arc, going back to chapter 1 and filling it in 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's another challenge here, and that is that this both needs to pick up some threads that were severed prematurely with 155, right? So, in the final issue of G.I. Joe, I'd forgotten this. I knew that in 149 or 150 or 151, Billy, Storm Shadow, and the Baroness get zapped with the brainwave scanner, but what I forget when I think about issue 155, Marvel's final issue, is that those three characters are not in that final issue. That plot thread that they're back to being A, Cobra, and B, zombies, that's just left dangling. And 155 ends with, this amazing letter from Snake Eyes. So Hama has to do a bunch of things here. He needs to pick up some threads that were left dangling. He needs to reintroduce some good guys and some bad guys so they can have a conflict. He needs to, I believe, at Devil's Due's urging, I don't know that Hama would have come up with the jugglers for the story by himself. He needs to introduce this sort of third element, which is sort of making the mission harder and more dramatic. I suspect that the news reporter and the camera person and the father and son who are on this boat from Vietnam. I think Hama came up with those characters and that idea on his own, right? I'm not sure who came up with the sort of 9/11 heroism reference. If Hama came up with it, I think he like sort of turns it a little bit on its side in a very Larry Hama way. So in addition to being a story in and of itself, it has to look back to the end of the Marvel run. It also has to look ahead to the beginning of the Devil's Due run. And why I don't think it needed at all to look ahead to the beginning of the Devil's Due run is that in the timeline, this happens just after 155. So there's still, there's a 7-year gap. There's still like 6.5 years for all this stuff to happen. And I don't need, this like just a few months after issue 155, Scarlet and Snake Eyes to, for my benefit, start setting up some of the drama that we'll see in G.I. Joe Devil's Due issue number 1 and with tossing the wedding ring, 23 or 24, or whatever it was. Like, let's just pretend that the Marvel run had gone on another like 20 issues or 40 issues before it ended. That's still plenty of time in a 5-year gap before all these changes would need to sort of start creeping in for the beginning of the Devil's Due run. And so I've always felt that this is Hama writing handcuffed. And it was such a strange experience to read the first issue and the second issue when they came out. Is it issue 1, which has... because like the story works for like 2 pages and then something subtle happens and somewhere in the side of my brain I just feel like my brain turning sideways. It's like, oh, okay, I don't know if that would, okay, and then I'm like back to enjoying it because it's not like, suddenly for halfway through the book it becomes black and white or it's a different artist or like the lettering is all like backwards and upside down. It's still the same writer, the same art all the way through, but it's in the storytelling, it's in the acting, it's in the dialogue where something is buzzing in the back of my head that it's familiar but it's not working. And there are some places where I feel like Dan Jurgens is doing very good work, and then there are a couple panels where I don't know if he's sort of unfamiliar with these like very specific vehicles or if he's at this point really used to drawing his own scripts, or if he's unfamiliar with cramming so much into one page, specific costumes and specific vehicles. But yeah, it's in issue 1. About halfway through, the 2 Ostrikers like pop off the train. And on the one hand, I think, oh, cool, 2 Ostrikers. And on the other hand, I feel like, oh, they look kind of stiff, like they're just cut out photos, like floating there. And this is right after a scene where the train is headed to like an interchange or a crossroads. And I'll say this. Jurgens has some really great poses. Like there's 2 great poses of Storm Shadow, like grabbing or slashing his sword. There's some good acting on like Mindbender and Destro and the Joes. Jurgens like tilts his characters. He like bends spines and draws ribcage torsos like toward us and away from us. At the same time, there are some panels which feel like he ran out of time or phoned it in. And again, it's like mixed in with this Hama not writing at his best. It's all disorienting.
So yeah, where to go from there? So one of the things you touched on, maybe we'll cover now, was that issue 2 ends with this very kind of on the nose tribute to the New York Fire Department, and my suspicion would be that this is coming from Hama, and as a New Yorker, I know that it was something that was, I guess, around the world it meant an awful lot to everybody, but specifically to him as a New Yorker, a very important and significant event that profoundly touched him.
He was basically across the street and saw it happen.
Yeah. So and I don't know, Tim, you'd probably be able to correct me here, what else was being published by Larry at in 2001, 2002. But certainly one of the earliest opportunities for him to put something in print, and certainly the very first one for him to put something in print in the world of G.I. Joe that kind of acknowledges those events and the heroism of the fire department. So yeah, I think he found a way to to include it.
So it's this 2-page scene, 2.5-page scene where Joe and Jane show up, and Joe says, "Why don't you go interview some real heroes like those guys over there?" And there's this big third of a page vignette panel, a panel with no border and no background. So there are these 5 firefighters are just standing full body in front of a white background, and they're not saying anything and they're not doing anything. So it feels a little bit like a pinup, a little bit like a cover. And so then the newscasters are interviewing them. And as Mark says, it's on the nose. And where Hama turns it around for me is that then there's this sort of realistic, pessimistic comment in the final 2 panels that it's actually not going to make the news because, it's just firefighters. It's not, it's not more dramatic or sexy or bloody, news. But then the issue ends abruptly, right? I feel like when I read most Hama G.I. Joe stories, whether it's the end of a story or certainly a self-contained story or sort of the middle of a bunch of stories, I feel like I sort of know when I'm on the final page. And for issues 1, 2, and 3 here, when I got to the final page, and then I saw an ad on the right side, and then I turned the page thinking there'd be a little bit more story, and there's just more ads, and I thought, oh, that was the end of the chapter. So these 3 first chapters also end abruptly, which is fine. If you're going to read the graphic novel and they'll put the 4 covers in the back, you read it through as one story, that's fine. But again, it's one more thing that makes this feel off.
And maybe a slight consequence of that writing style that he's having to follow, that he knows that, okay, issue 2 is going to be the Transcarpathia adventure. Issue number 1 is going to end with effectively Destro getting away with the MacGuffin, and then sort of just trying to kind of balance that in that kind of artificial way, and it not quite necessarily flowing in the way that you would then expect from the normal feel, which is this nebulous thing that you can't quite put your finger on of how a G.I. Joe comic would expect to flow and end at the end of an issue.
Jay, tell us something that worked for you here, since we're dancing on this theme of what's sort of not working.
Honestly, I was looking through the book trying to find just that, something that that I wasn't just going to jump in here and be negative about. There's it's familiar. It's nice to see. I think Larry's still got a feel for some of the characters where like I said, just do without Snake Eyes and Scarlet. I'm not even going to talk about them anymore. They're dead to me as far as this goes. But I'm looking at issue 2 right now. The Joes come in contact with the other vet, which is a little heavy-fisted. Some of the dialogue, but that's kind of that's Larry. It's funny, you get into the next part with Destro and Zartan, and Destro's just kind of talking down to Zartan and the Dreadnoks again, and Zartan's pissed about that, and that's familiar and is good. There's little bits of dialogue that just kind of stick out. Cobra Commander, we cut to Cobra Commander. He's in a shooting gallery again, but he's sitting in a chair. I'm like, man, come on, get up. Don't be lazy. Just at least stand up and shoot those bats. Do something. But I did like that, Destro at one point was, oh yeah, here it is. Cobra Commander says, I'm not interested in hearing any reports until you have the one that says, you have it. It's just like, I don't even care. Just do what you're supposed to do. Leave your whining and excuses to somebody else. Flip through here. More Scarlet stuff. The Wolves hate all that. We got this one sleepy general. I don't know. I feel like this guy's been drugged. He looks like, I don't know what that girl gave him, but he's going to fall asleep there in that Pentagon meeting. Storm Shadow and the Baroness and Billy come in, and we get some classic Larry dialogue. Baroness says, the androids are wearing the faces of prominent G.I. Joe team members, and Storm Shadow says, how mordantly amusing yet intrinsically unsatisfying. Nobody is going to write that except for Larry. That's dead on. That's perfect classic Larry Hama dialogue there. And then something about the next scene.
Sorry, Jay, I had that bit of dialogue in there as one of my Hammer times.
One of your favorites?
As well, actually. No, actually.
Oh, a Hamism?
My Hammerisms. because I felt that particular part of the dialogue, the androids are wearing the faces of prominent G.I. Joe team members, was the Hammerism being that Larry's deploying dialogue to make up for deficiencies in the art to try and explain it, because the bats are wearing these masks, but apart from earlier on in the story where there was a Snake Eyes one, it's not entirely clear what those masks are actually meant to depict. They're fairly kind of generic kind of faces, so it's not particularly obvious who they're supposed to be. So it's a way of Larry pointing out those masks represent G.I. Joe faces.
Yeah, they don't really look that great like bats or what they're supposed to be disguised as. Then the scene with Destro and the other old fisherman I thought was good. I mean, there's a lot of really great Hama dialogue. It felt familiar in a lot of ways, and it made me once again say, man, I wish I was reviewing the A-Raw stuff with Tim and Mark, because especially now Hama seems to be on a roll in that book. But a lot of the stuff in here, like I said, we're not going to get to.
And I think, Jade, sort of the point about the dialogue, is true in the A-Raw, is, even in the issues that we enjoyed the least from Larry, there was always the odd moment here or there, particularly from the voice of Cobra Commander, where there's a completely zinging line where he's some withering letdown or use of
just something crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, people have talked in the past about just the crazy words that Cobra Commander uses. You figure Cobra Commander's probably got to be insane, and he's got like a book of the day, a book of 5-syllable words a day that he keeps in his bathroom or something. He just goes in there every morning, and he thinks, I'm going to work this into a conversation today. Even though it's just crazy stuff
somehow. Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot I like in here. Like I said, a lot of the dialogue is just, it's nice to see Hama go back to these characters. He does know a lot of them. And Jurgens art, I'm not a huge Jurgens fan, but a lot of it's really good. The only kind of the big issue that I had was kind of in an overall thing, I guess, is we don't often see Duke and Hawk in the field together. So having them both there from a mission standpoint made it awkward, but then also kind of from the art, not to mention the fact that Dan Jurgens draws Hawk like Steve Rogers when he should be much older. It just, the whole Hawk Duke thing didn't necessarily work, and the look of Hawk kind of had a issue with.
I go back to the forehead thing, right? Like Duke traditionally, I mean, Duke now is always young and has like short hair, but he's young. Traditionally Duke in the toy and in the comics, he has a little bit of a receding hairline. Yeah. I don't know, he's 30, but Hawk is definitely 45 or 50. And, like artists should draw some lines under Hawk's eyes, and he shouldn't have, the hair of a like
20-year-old,
a model California surfer.
If you look at page 20 or not page 20, page 10 in number 2, where Duke and Hawk are on the boat. Number 1, right off the bat, of course, it's overcolored, but Hawk looks younger than Duke in like every panel, and especially the last panel. He's got this kind of, I'm going out on my surfboard kind of look, and I'm like, Hawk is 50.
This is also a place where we might put some of this at the feet of the inker. If an inker is, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on Bob Layton.
You're right, though.
I'm just speaking generally. Like, inkers can make some corrections to the artwork as they go, but also you have to give them the time and you have to give them the script. So if someone hands an inker a bunch of pencil pages and says, ink these, particularly if it's like, ink these quickly, we're behind schedule, they're going to do a good job. If someone gives an inker the script and sort of makes some reminders like, this plane is actually quite shiny, whereas this other plane is dull, or, this guy's 30, this guy's 50. And I can imagine that, the inkers of this arc were not given that extra information. But
and maybe neither of these guys are familiar with the property. They don't know
there's definitely
that Hawk is supposed to be
definitely
twice Duke's age.
They're definitely not familiar with this property.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a minor nitpick. Like we said, I don't want to get into that. I liked how Hama took, and I kind of touched on this in the beginning, how he did use 4 issues to tell a story and give it space to breathe. Didn't feel nearly as rushed as some of the other ones that we've read, but just I don't know. There was a good kind of almost road trip quality to it. You know, the Joes start in Utah. They go from Utah to Florida, and then we have an awkward transition where you find out they're in a train, and I didn't know they were in a train. So then they're on in Georgia, and then they're going up the coast, and so there's this kind of feeling that the whole story is moving, and Destro's following them. You got the Zartan, the Dreadnoks in there. Yeah, I liked it. I didn't like it as much as I could have or wanted to.
Sounds like you like the plot, not the script.
Well, I don't know, but I did like some of the script. I mean, I liked most of the script.
Mark, were you about to jump in with something?
I was just going to say, when we were talking about Hawk and Duke, that the particularly in that very, very first scene where we've got Duke and Hawk and also Snake Eyes, and they're all in mufti, so they're in their own clothes and not in the uniforms, and 2 of them are wearing black t-shirts. It just seems to be unnecessarily confusing in terms of following the characters, particularly to maybe people who aren't sort of completely all over the property in the ways that the super fans are. But they could quite easily have been in their own clothes, and Snake Eyes could have been differentiated from Hawk with a different colored t-shirt, for example. But yeah.
So I think that Dan Jurgens, I think he is an artist who has great instincts, and if he's not doing his best, like, conscientious job, he'll still do a good job. And with the challenges of a G.I. Joe story, right? Lots of costumes, keeping track of people, weapons, right? There are also like animals to draw in this, and vehicles. And maybe he was rushed. I'm not sure, but I feel like half the panels, half the pages sort of really work. There's some like exciting things, and then there's some panels where I find the pose is a little stiff, or like this thing that Mark just called out with Snake Eyes' shirt in black, and also Hawk's shirt in black in the opening scene, where sometimes Jurgens cuts a small corner, right? Like there's a thing you can do in comic art where if someone is wearing something black, you just like X it out and fill it in completely in black. You don't draw as if there's still going to be some clothing folds or some muscles. And that's a really small thing. And it's like a good time-saving thing. And yet at the same time, we've got these 3 guys, they're all blonde. And I can also imagine looking at page 3, I can imagine that Hama's plot for that first panel definitely calls out that Snake Eyes is somehow sort of separated from the other 3, or looking away, or like in shadow, or mysterious, right? Like that's that little shadow on Snake Eyes' face there. That's not an accident. And so, we see this with the modern issues. When you bring someone onto a brand like this that A, has hundreds of issues of history, and B, has so much specific reference, I think you need like an editor sort of just to provide extra reference and offer some small suggestions and corrections. It's like, oh, well, that guy needs to be in a different shirt because they're all going to be blonde. Or, this guy actually is 50, not 30. I do want to point out, Jay referred to the train thing, and I'm glad he said it that way. I can't tell if it's a storytelling reveal that the Joes in issue, is it 1? The Joes in issue 1 yep. are in a train. I think it's Hama doing a reveal where the Joes are somewhere. They're in some kind of like truck or warehouse or shipping container. And then you turn the page and it turns out that they're on a train. And that's supposed to be like really exciting because it's this like, oh, we're under attack. There's a plane thing above us and we're moving.
Yeah, and Tim, it is a reveal because I have the script because I've got the trade paperback of this, and they include the script to issue 1 in the back, and it says, "Pull back to see that Stalker and Gung Ho are standing inside what seems to be a metal cylinder of some sort. Could it be a submarine? The curving walls are absolutely featureless except for riveted seams." So yeah, it is
Great.
intended to be somewhat mysterious, and then
Okay.
yeah,
So
it is a reveal as they come outside.
So I chalk this up. I think there's subtle thing. Even if Hama's like getting a scene to work the way that he would have if he'd been able to write the way that he wanted, I think there's still some subtle things that are like compressing or folding these scenes and how they breathe, what someone says, how they move. So I think some of this is Hama, and I can't quite tell. I think some of this is Jurgens, where maybe that page turn reveal with the plane firing down on the train, maybe we need to be further away, and the plane needs to be sort of more dynamic. Like it's hovering, but it feels like perfectly still. And then like the opposing page with these 3 Cobra soldiers rappelling down on ropes. Their poses feel really. Anyway, sorry. What I want to say is. Later in the issue or in the next issue, someone refers back to how this like train thing, the Dreadnoks didn't pull it off successfully. And someone says, oh, it was like a railroad crossing or an interchange. And I thought, oh, I couldn't tell. Like that page where the Dreadnoks, this is in issue 1, where Zartan and the 3 Dreadnoks are actually standing on the tracks, like chopping it up. Like it's not clear where they are. And I know there's a little narration box that's a caption that says "up ahead." I don't know if maybe Mark can tell us. I don't know if it's in the plot or if Jurgens just phoned in a little bit of this panel, but Ripper is just standing in the background, like not doing anything. And then there's this dialogue where Torch says, "Yeah, even if Ripper just laid back and let us do all the work." Right? It's like, no, if you got three tough guys and 2 of them are supposed to be chopping up the train tracks. I bet all 3 of them are supposed to be chopping up the train tracks. There's something else that happens on this page. I'm not going to say anything else about the color, except that I love how all the characters look, because the characters are all just 2 or 3 colors per object: hair, complexion, shirt, pants. There's something on this page which does not work in the coloring, and that is in the first panel there's a big explosion, in the second panel there's a big explosion, and then in the third and fourth panels Hi-Fi is treating the setting sun in the background the exact same as the explosion. And that is actually making the storytelling confusing, because I'm sort of thinking like, oh, did the plane crash kind of behind the Dreadnoks, or like, is the thing behind Zartan in the final panel, like, yes, that's the sun, there's lens flare, but like, is that the train behind him and the light, it's like sneaking up on him? Is that Torch's torch? Once again, Hi-Fi, less is more. And then one last thing, and this is a lettering mistake and an editorial mistake for not fixing it. In this panel, this is in issue 1 again, where Zartan and the Dreadnoks are on the train tracks and they're chopping it up, but like Jurgens just chose the wrong camera angle, so it's not quite clear sort of where they are and what's happening. But there are 2 signs behind them with text on them, and then you turn the page and the Joes are on the train and there's a sign behind them, and it's supposed to be that exact, like the train is caught up with this bridge or interchange or track crossing
so that's the storytelling device, sort of.
So the like bridge thing and the billboard are supposed to cement us in the previous page to the next page. It's like, okay, the Joes on the train have caught up with where the Dreadnoks were a moment ago, but there's no text on the billboard. So it just looks like either a different billboard. So I'm like, oh, is the train much further away, or did it pass where the Dreadnoks were chopping up the train? And it's not really clear from Jurgens' art that Dreadnoks are chopping up the train. And then in this next page, where the 2 Off-Strikers jump off the train, the top 2 panels where the train is going to derail, like Jurgens is almost avoiding showing this clearly, that like there's track and then there's damaged track, or there's track and then there's no track, and there's a train and it's on the track and it's heading towards the danger zone, and then it actually starts to like crash or fall or just derail. And then this panel with these 2 Off-Strikers popping off with the 6 Joes, Hama's asking a lot of this scene, and I have read a script where Hama has written like action happening next to a train. And I've seen artists pull this off. And yet Jurgens chooses to make the Ostrikers so big here that we sort of don't see any of the train, and we don't see any of the like train crashing. And then Hi-Fi decides that it's smoke behind the Ostrikers, that the train is like disappearing into smoke or crashing into smoke. And I think that's accurate, but maybe this was the case where it was supposed to be an explosion and not like, flat beige. And then the fact that the Dreadnoks disappear from the story. And this is where it feels like, and I'm shifting gears very slightly here. This is where it feels like, I kind of feel like Devil's Due said to Hama, hey, make sure you include these 30 characters.
Yeah.
And this story didn't need that.
Yeah, this is the bit with the Dreadnoks. Yeah.
I have a real quick little comment about that page where the Dreadnoks are tearing up the train tracks. First of all, I don't know how effective a chainsaw is going to be against a train track. That I've destroyed those on much lesser things. But then, secondly, what I wondered, I was going to ask Tim this here. Do you think that maybe Gene Colan was visiting Dan Jurgens' house, and Dan said, "Hey, throw Zartan on here for me, real quick."
Zartan's
looks to me like
Zartan's shoulders are quite wide here.
Yeah, well, just the shadowing and everything, the brushwork, it looks like a Colan to me. It doesn't look like Jurgens at all.
There's a comparison that I want to make here in the storytelling, a thing that doesn't work and a thing that does. In issue 2, we see this. So the boat is heading up the East Coast, and we cut back to the jugglers, and then Cobra Commander tells Destro to go to Broca Beach, which is like fun and exciting, because if you've read G.I. Joe, you know what that means. And then there's this time jump, right? This is I'm holding the comic, and I'm at the centerfold, so because I see the staples, so I know I'm halfway. I don't know what page number it is, but I know I'm halfway through. And the caption box says 2 days later, and there's a news reporter reporting about some fight, and behind her, I know it's a crashed Cobra Mamba, and she is relating what just happened. And then you turn the page, and then there's a flashback which shows the missing time that we jumped ahead in those 2 days. And Hama's really savvy with his sort of keeping track of time in his stories. And I don't know if this is like, again, he's like, oh, I'm running out of pages. I have to hit like the 22 page mark, and I'm on page 17 or whatever. I don't know if he's like feeling experimental, because this is the guy who did the silent issue and SFX and Triptych and Diptych, and has done, several more silent issues. But this, every time I've read the story, right, 2002, a year ago, and yesterday, this like 2 page like unnecessary time jump backtrack like jumps out to me. And then as a comparison, right, last night I'd read issues 1 and 2, and I'm taking notes, and I'm like, it sort of works, it sort of doesn't. And then I got to issue 3, and I took a deep breath, and I thought, oh, here's another issue of this that's going to sort of work and sort of not. And issue 3 actually completely works for me. And halfway through, I thought, wait, was I like not paying attention in 2001 and last year when I read and reread this arcs? Issue 3 works completely. Right? Like there's even with lots of characters, like Billy and Baroness and Storm Shadow feels a little redundant because they're not all 3 of them doing like distinctly different things in the story arc, but they work as a trio because they're all zapped by the brainwave scanner, and like fans will want Hama to check us in on them. But this whole issue is at Destro's Silent Castle, and there's this really satisfying like double back over and over of like, who's up there? We're down here. We're on the road that approaches the Silent Castle. Where's Wild Bill? He's in trouble. He's back, and he's done a clever Hama sleight of hand. It's like, Wild Bill, how did you fix the tomahawk? It's like, with a Deus Ex Machina. That's not unbelievable. And I actually found issue 3 super fun, and it felt like the recent issues that we've been reading in A Real American Hero that are special missions or untold tales. It felt like a really good single issue, and it just motored along, and it didn't have any of these like non-player characters, like the vet fisherman guy and the like news reporter, and it brought in one more Joe to the story, Wild Bill, who maybe some fans want to check in on. And I got to the end of issue 3, and I thought, okay, so 1 and 2 don't quite work. 3 really works. What's going to happen when I get to 4? And 4 sort of splits the difference. The stuff that feels like Hama doing Hama works, and then at the end, when I can see Hama shoehorning in his story to like fit the Devil's Due upcoming stuff. So I want to say issue 2 is weird, and issue 2 has that weird continuity glitch with the the metal insignia on the juggler's hat that like just is drawn wrong in one panel. So like issue 2 doesn't work for me. Issue 3 totally works for me.
I'm with you there. Issue 3 is great. It really was, just from beginning to end, just a ride. And like you said, kind of what I echoed, what I said earlier about going from Utah, down to Florida, up through Georgia, to you just feel the progression of how the story flows. And this one is just like that. And you're back and forth with all these different characters. It's really great. There was, as we're flipping through it right now, there's one panel, and this is probably going to sound silly, but to me, I'm looking at this, and there's a specific panel that just, like I said, I'm not a fan of. I mean, Jurgens is a good artist. I wouldn't say that I dislike his artwork. Really, the only thing that I've ever read that he's done was some Superman stuff, and I think he did a Superman Aliens maybe that was inked by Kevin Nolan, which I love because I love Kevin Nolan.
Yes.
But page 15 starts off with Snake Eyes using the castle defenses against itself. The third panel is a worm's eye view. You've got Dr. Mindbender, and you got all these Vipers running for you. There's 4 Vipers in that panel. That's awesome. That's an awesome bit of storytelling and camera placement right there. It's fantastic.
Here. I think this is.
So, yeah.
I think this is one of those cases where Jurgens, either for his familiarity and comfort level, or like the deadline, I think some of the pages and panels in this arc look great, and some of them are not successful or not clear. But yeah, you're right. This is a great page, and this very much reminds me of how Hama approached issue 21 of the original series in keeping track of where we are in and on the Silent Castle. The last panel of page 14, right? Snake Eyes is in the distance, and he's on the other turret, and he's now aiming at us, at these 2 Vipers. And then you get this closure, right? First panel, page 15 that you referred to, Snake Eyes is now blasting the other 2 Vipers on that far
and that's awesome.
turret.
It's just
And then similarly, on the bottom panel of page 15, Snake Eyes is now turned and aimed his turret upward, and he's now going to take out another higher turret.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
He's elevating to take us out. Traverse and engage.
And you can see the second turret in the first panel.
Mark, we should hand the mic back to you, because Jay and I have been going back and forth.
Oh, let me jump in real quick before we get back to Mark. There was another little bit of really nice a visual cue that made me think of you, Tim, when I read it. Was in I'm not sure whether, yeah, it was page 10 of issue 1. The first panel has the Cobra Spy calling back in, and then the second panel is kind of a tall vertical panel with Dr. Mindbender, and he's just got the phone in his hand, but it's away from his face. And it's like, okay, that's a little cue to let us know that was her just talking. And, and it was just subtle, but it worked. And it made me think of things that we've talked about throughout, how little, just like that with the 2 turrets, having the second turret in the first panel, and then boom, at the last panel, he turns around and moves it. It's a nice little bit of
business
continuity throughout the storytelling.
Did you call that page 10? That's page 9.
Yeah. Okay.
Mark, jump back in.
Yeah, I've got some I Spies to dig into if you're ready for that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I spy with my little eye.
So we've got I Spy, a funky-looking Cobra airship helicopter thing, which puts me in mind a little bit of some of those early G.I. Joe issues where the Cobras didn't necessarily have a large armory of pre-designed toys that had come out, and so the artists were just coming up with their own thing, and this kind of helicopter feels like that kind of early 80s crazy boxy sci-fi kind of design, and piloted by what looks like 2 Aero Vipers, I believe, who were the Condor pilots, which appears later on, but piloted by Destro. The story opens in January 1995, which is 1 month after the cover dated December 1994 issue 155. So very much actually continuing on the next month after issue 155.
But I believe 155, I believe it was solicited in August, so I believe it actually came to stores in September, October.
The cover date was, an indicator of when it should be pulled from the shelves rather than necessarily when it was coming out. But for people looking back
That
on
always
the issue,
confused me as a kid.
it is the date on the front. I spy some medallions around the neck of the BATs that are being shot at by Cobra Commander. Any speculation as to what the heck those are supposed to be?
That's a good question, because I see a medallion in panel 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't see those medallions in the previous panel.
Just confusing, just to me. I wasn't. It's got to be there for some reason. It's got to signify something. But I'd be darned if I know what it is.
Maybe it's got something to do with the mask, like a back of the mask or something.
Maybe it's actually supposed to be a target, a circular target.
Could be. Okay. Next up, I spy General Thurston Crowther, the corrupt juggler who hired Major Blood to stop Snake Eyes from rescuing George Strawhacker, the American spy that was imprisoned in Barovia back in the original run. I spy Cobra Troopers who say, I am more than ready to KJB with an asterisk. Kick Joe butt. I just love the fact that they've introduced this kind of acronym and then explain it like it's just the jargon that is that the Cobras use.
I spy the Twin Towers.
Well, absolutely,
because the story takes place before. I mean, whether or not the story is going to slow down for a moment to nod to the heroes of 9/11. The story takes place before 9/11, and so there's a scene in Manhattan, and we can see the Twin Towers. So back to you, Mark.
Yeah, and specifically, referenced in terms of, going all the way to the top, carrying the equipment, by the fire department. Next up for me is Cobra Troopers being deployed from a helicopter to a train, which put me in mind of a possibly unfavourable comparison to Yearbook 2, given the quality of Golden's storytelling in that sequence as the Cobra Troopers dismount onto the top of a moving train from what do we call that helicopter now? Aspid.
As a corollary to that, I spy that a story has both Cobra soldiers and also Cobra Vipers.
Oh yes.
As if I always as kids, my brother and I sort of thought, well, the Cobra soldiers are still around and they're more the first wave, and the Vipers are a step up, or they're going to keep all the soldiers around until they've made enough Viper uniforms, and then they retire all the Cobra soldier blue uniforms.
Yeah, tailoring logistics.
Or until the guys in the old costumes all get KO'd.
We've got Snake Eyes being called out as the master of the way of the inner anvil, that he can stop his heartbeat and assume the perfect semblance of death. And flicking back to issue 10 of the original run, you'll remember that Snake Eyes was captured and put in the brainwave scanner by Dr. Venom, and as on the screens, it referred to the fact that, I shall impart to you the most well-kept secret technique handed down from ninja to ninja through countless generations, the way of the inner anvil, whereby you may still your breath and heartbeat to the semblance of death itself. So, a call back all the way back to that, the name of that ninja technique.
I spy, this is not quite an I spy, but Joe and Jane are in this story, along with their weird top secret lab at the top of the Empire State Building with the space laser, which we saw in, help me out, issue 86, and then also 127?
I'll take your word for it. My memory for numbers is not as quick as yours.
That's why I always preface it with the word around or the word maybe.
Joe and Jane looking nothing like Demi Moore and Bruce Willis.
Mm-hmm.
Throwing that out there.
So jumping away from I Spy for a moment, Mark referred to this medallion on the bats on page 4 of issue 2, and I want to point out something that I really like on the next page. So this is the top panel of page 5 of issue 2. So in previous episodes, I have spoken a lot about how I think water should be colored in comics and also sometimes the sky. And what happens a lot of times in modern comics is the artist leaves it blank, and then the color artist either drops in a photo of water or the sky, which I think is really lazy and distracting because this isn't a collage, right? Or they like sort of paint or sort of trace paint like a photo of water or sky, and I think it's better but often done poorly, and I'd rather they just fill it in with light blue or whatever. So if anyone needs a visual reminder of how you actually draw water when there's a boat or a G.I. Joe aircraft carrier in the water, so that the colorist doesn't have this giant field of white to like contend with, like, oh, I have to go to Google Earth and find some high-res photo of like waves, which like is not what it would look like. Look at this panel of this Vietnam era boat off the coast of South Carolina, flying a little American flag. We can see Scarlet and Snake Eyes in the front. Look what Dan Jurgens and Bob Layton have done. They have inked the water so that it looks like water. There's water with little waves, there's a wake, and then in the next panel and 2 panels after that, there's a little bit of inking which shows clouds. So artists, unless you're working with like the best colorists, and there are only a few of those, please, like draw the trees. Don't have your colorist just like drop in some weird photo of like green tree texture. It looks bad.
I like that Jurgens took the water clear down to the bottom of the page too.
Yeah, so panel 1 is really sort of like the whole page.
Yeah, and it makes everything else kind of an insert.
Yeah, the next, yes.
Just a nice framing thing.
I Spy in the back of issue 3, there is a preview for a Microdots comic published at the same time by Devil's Due, penciled by Steve Kurth, and he's gotten a lot better than when he drew G.I. Joe comics, 6 months or a year earlier for Devil's Due. So it's not a G.I. Joe I Spy, and for Mark and those of you reading the graphic novel, it's not an I Spy. Mark, do you want to tell us about the cover of the softcover collection? What is it, and how do you feel about it?
The cover is weird, really, isn't it?
How does that make you feel?
The top half is repurposing of an interior shot. It's the 2 oar strikers coming down to that Vietnam era boat with Snake Eyes sort of over the shoulder of Snake Eyes.
It's the splash. It's page 1 of issue 2.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh!
And then the sort of the bottom third of the book is sort of solo boxes featuring Mindbender, Cobra Commander, Storm Shadow, and Shouty Face Destro. And yeah, it's a weird cover. I don't know why they went for this rather than say just using issue 1. To be honest, given the caliber of the art that they already had there, why not use it? Weird.
Ordinarily, I would guess it's because if you reuse artwork from a cover, you're going to have to pay that artist again. But I think we've sort of established that, post-Marvel, publishers of G.I. Joe comics don't pay royalties or residuals when the issues get reprinted, right? You get a page rate to write or draw the issue, and then if an old issue gets reprinted and it's got your work, or an issue from last month gets reprinted in a book, you don't get paid again, whereas at DC and Marvel you do. So ordinarily I'd think, oh, well, if they just reuse some art by Jurgens, they either don't have to pay for that or they don't have to pay as much. But I don't think that Dave Dorman was going to get a reprint fee if they reused. I could be wrong. One more question I wish I'd asked Blaylock.
And strangely enough, I mean, at this era, Devil's Due were typically commissioning new cover art for their trades rather than reusing cover
That's
art.
right.
I don't know that it was necessarily likely to be money saving. It might have been more of the perspective that they want to do something new and unique to differentiate the trade paperback cover from other covers.
This is a good guess, that we want people to know that this is the old school Joe.
Yeah, so I think it was probably a shorthand for creating a brand new cover and kind of spotlighting what the interiors might be like.
Error detected. Error detected. No prize incoming.
I don't know if this is an error detective or, as Mark might call it, a nitpick, but in issue 3, Destro is flying the Condor and it gets hit with a missile, and he doesn't separate it. The Condor can split into two planes, and I mean, maybe the story would be the same in either case. He's going to radio Cobra Commander and say, "Where should I put this down?" But this is also the Larry Hama who previously has written the Rattlers, which as toys and in the cartoon have folding wings and are VTOL. He several times he has not treated the Rattlers as VTOL, right? So maybe Hama is either maybe he's deciding some of the more fantastic elements of the toys he's going to leave out, or maybe there's a million things to juggle, and Hama just didn't remember that the Condor can split into two planes.
Probably. Can I just say how nice it is to see that plane?
Yeah.
I mean, that was not one that I had because I pretty much had quit by that time. But I feel like in a story where we've got Destro, Cobra Commander, Billy, Dukes, Zartan, Hawk, Scarlet, Snake Eyes, all the top guys, the A-level, most recognizable things, that we've got a Condor instead of a Rattler. It's just neat to see a different kind of vehicle in there for a change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and they also stick in a trouble bubble slightly later on, which is not a vehicle that Hammer used very much in the original run.
This is a good reminder. I wanted to get your guys' take on this. I love this scene where the Joes jump onto the Cobra flight pod, the trouble bubble, from the top of the Silent Castle to sort of get
it's too heavy
to get down. That page is great. It's funny. It's also clever, right? It's like Hama dealing with the reality of I'm up here, you're down there. How do we move from A to B? But in the previous 2 pages, that shaped charge gets glued to the top of Mindbender's Rattler. His flight pod blows up and throws him out of it. And I think Jurgens and Hi-Fi are trying to sort of parse that only the top half, the glass part, explodes and the bottom half is fine. But that's a big explosion. And then, so on the next page, when Duke is looking down and he jumps onto this trouble bubble that's kind of smoking, I thought that was a second trouble bubble. And then I thought, where did that come from? Because clearly, I thought, Mindbender's entire trouble bubble blew up and crashed. So I think this is Jurgens being a little careless in his visual storytelling, because in that previous page, we're looking past Cobra Commander's shoulder and he's saying, "What now? Somebody go pick up the good doctor and bandage him up." And as the glass of the trouble bubble explodes, again, it's not the bottom half of the flight pod that explodes. So I found that storytelling a little confusing. Also, not the sound effect that I would use for half of a Cobra flight pod blowing up, because that sound effect actually is what I would use for a burning Cobra flight pod landing, crashing,
or a gunshot.
Yes, that too.
I thought the whole shaped charge thing was kind of unclear. The artwork with that whole sequence was just a little sloppy.
Well, I think Hi-Fi kept.
Yeah, their coloring didn't help.
Yeah, Hi-Fi kept coloring what I think is the 3 tips that have epoxy as if they were like a blowtorch or an acetylene torch. So it's glowing orange. It's is that what that actually looks like? So is that a fuse, like a stick of dynamite?
One of my nitpicks was going to be actually that scene you were talking about earlier about the Condor being hit by the death ray, which is that the the Death Ray is sort of been established as functioning on the basis of coded GPS coordinates. So how on earth does it hit a condor that is, would be moving in flight rather than stationary in one specific GPS coordinate, set of coordinates?
Very good.
Bruce Willis, baby.
I've also, Hama uses material in this comic, in these comics, that is futuristic but quite realistic. That seems fantastic, but 10 years later is real, and I believe that we have or will soon have space lasers like this. But I have felt the 2 or 3 times that Joe and Jane have shown up in their secret lab at the top of the Empire State Building and then used this space laser. I feel like it's happened one time too many, and that it happens 2 or 3 times in this story is then sort of the double whammy. It's like...
I like Destro. I like the moment when they hit the Condor and Destro's like, where did that come from? It made me think of Return of the Jedi when Admiral Akbar's like, where'd that laser come from? He's like, that came from the Death Star.
But I guess they have to establish it as being used at least once before then it becomes the
finale.
The finale, so that it's established as how it works, what it does.
Yes, but I find it's a little bit much for this world of G.I. Joe. Where like a lot of problems get solved with artillery. We're like, oh, we've got the General or the Rolling Thunder 2 miles back. It's like, can we get a shell to blow up this plane? It's like, well, we've got a space laser. We've got a space laser. But again, I can't stand on 2 feet and say this, because at the same time, it's like, well, of course, Snake Eyes can stop his heartbeat. He's a ninja, and that goes back to issue 10, right?
Yeah. Okay, onto more nitpicks from me. Okay. Here comes the nitpick, Funky Bunch. So, how does Scarlet simultaneously shoot 3 Cobra Troopers who are spread out with 3 arrows from a bolt-action crossbow, whilst, let's add, for more incredulity, simultaneously emerging from the train tanker?
I don't know what you're talking about. Scarlet's not in this book.
Okay, we have
she's that good.
She's that good. Yeah, end of. Next up, we have Hawk delivering a very typically Hammer line from him. We don't get parades, and we don't get medals, and we don't get a handshake from the POTS on the White House lawn. What we get is the satisfaction from doing our job, and that piece of dialogue is meant to explain why they should be doing why should be contacting the jugglers when they believe that they're being double crossed and set up, and probably by delivering those coordinates to them, likely to have Cobra then on their ass trying to kill them. Job satisfaction, but how much job satisfaction do you get from delivering information to traitorous people who are trying to stab you in your back and have you killed? From being slipped
from
to the short
played.
end, as they call it.
Hawk seems to be really more a company man, to use a phrase, in this than I think that he was before. He's just like, we'll do what they tell us to. Okay. Well, didn't we just read one where Hawk was like, no, we're not going to take that kid to be killed?
That's right.
I mean, he's clearly does what he thinks is best, not what the jugglers tell him to do. So I think that was a little out of character. And it happened throughout. Next
up, final nitpick, and this is one that I saw a couple of reviews of these issues singled out as the thing that they disliked the most, was Hawk's nearly inhuman recovery from his wound. So he gets a nasty wound to his chest, not a sucking chest wound, but nasty nonetheless, which Gung Ho is able to patch up, and then they get to New York, but then instantly, instead of staying behind in New York and getting attention, he Charlie Mikes and continues on to the next part of the mission, the Silent Castle. You'd have thought he might have kind of timed out at that point and let the other guys continue on with the mission.
Is there an error detected? I remember an issue in the Marvel run when someone wrote in a letter, Gung Ho showed up and hadn't been in the comic for a while, and then I feel like someone wrote in and said, "Hey, Gung Ho's accent is gone, but it was definitely here in issue 11 when he first showed up. What gives?" And I think, I don't know if like Bobby Chase was answering the letters or Hama was, but I think the explanation, or maybe someone tried it for a no prize. I think the explanation was, well, you sort of take on the accent of the people you're around, or if you move, you lose your accent. So I wanted to ask the two of you, since I'm only half remembering this, did Gung Ho's accent in issue 1 jump out at you as either a little continuity flub or like good, authentic Gung Ho? Do you have a stake in this?
I'd say it's the stereotypical Gumbo, Bayou, Gung Ho. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't strike me as out of character or odd at all.
Okay, but not like
Overdone.
I think what I'm asking is not is it overdone, but I think what I'm asking is, do you remember a time in the Marvel run when Gung Ho lost his accent, and therefore is this a proper correction, or do you feel like if he lost it and they explained it with sort of a no prize, should he continue to not have it, and therefore this is an error?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm sure that over the course of the series, he probably did kind of lose it. Most of those characters, especially one like Gung Ho, if they come from a particular region, the first 3 or 4 appearances, they're going to be really heavy on those kind of character traits. So I'm sure that the first few appearances were kind of thick on that, Bayou dialogue. And then probably as the series went on, it kind of leveled out a little bit. I don't remember it doing that. That's just me assuming, but I know that it was kind of thick in the beginning.
But beyond his first few appearances as well, I guess his appearance probably did taper out a little bit. He was probably given a little
just
bit,
a supporting character at that point.
A little bit less dialogue, and I guess I think it's forgivable to let something like that slip a bit. I had a very nitpicky error detected, which was just that Scarlet at one point in, I think it's issue 4, is missing her roll neck, and so it's just sort of either drawn or coloured with some sort of rather swooping cleavage-orama.
Yeah, devils do Scarlet.
But G.I. J didn't notice that one because Scarlet's not in this arc, as we established.
Who are you talking about?
Should we do favourite line of dialogue?
Yeah.
Quote of the week, 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 quote of the week.
Let me go first, because I've actually got 3, and if you guys don't use all 3 of them, then I'm gonna jump in later. But probably my favorite one was in, it's in the battle in the castle, and Destro is in the higher levels of the castle, and he's coming down with a Viper, and the Viper complains about having to walk down 20 flights of stairs, and Destro says, "It's all going down, weakling." It was so funny that was in there. You had a Viper going, 20 flights. And I'm like, who throws this dialogue in here? But that's, again, was kind of a Hamaism maybe. And
then then Destro says to himself later on that he wishes he'd installed an elevator.
Yeah, some kind of elevator or something.
That's my favorite line. Someday I should have elevators installed. It's a full body. It's a small panel, but it's a full body shot of him running up the stairs. And I like that because it caps the joke from the previous issue where Destro is nagging some Cobra soldiers or Vipers. And that's a thing like, I feel like we expect G.I. Joe to do more often in the comics than in the cartoon, where the troopers are like lazy or incompetent, or the superiors give them a hard time. And it actually very rarely happens. So it really sticks out when Destro gives this Viper a hard time. But the reason, not just because it's funny when Destro says, someday I should have elevators installed. The reason why I like it is twofold. One, once again, Hama is dealing with the physicality of a character or characters or equipment moving from point A to point B. And all of issue 3 is like up, down, on the Silent Castle. And then 4 has to sort of wrap that up. And then B, this panel very lightly echoes a panel from issue 21.
Yep.
Where Destro is leading a bunch of Cobra soldiers
Mhm.
up the stairs of the Silent Castle to get Snake Eyes, and this is the kind of sort of subtle reference. And I don't even think it's a reference. I think Hama's just returning to a location that he established previously, and characters are moving about it. But I see it as like not a cute nod, but just like a reference to Silent Interlude.
Nice.
Yeah, I noticed that panel.
And I have
another.
It
really echoes the one from 21.
I'm going to jump in before Mark. I have another silver medal favorite line. 1, 2, 3, 4 panels after my favorite line, Destro says, he's running toward us. I hope we have the right plugs, because this is no, seriously, this is the second time. First with the like witness to the firefight, and then the newscaster and the camera operator.
Yeah.
This is the second time that Hama has taken a couple lines of dialogue out so that a character can refer to plugs and adapters, like plugging an XLR or a Mini or a phono or a BNC or an RCA. Like plug, your headphones are a Mini plug. The big ones that go into the side of a guitar, that's a phono jack. And this is what, like, remember the silly bit at the end of the movie Independence Day when
the virus
and like, of course, this alien spaceship will somehow talk to my like Apple laptop so I can upload a virus. It's like, no, that's silly. We're all just going to take it on faith. And Hama takes a moment, and like it does work out. It's not a plot point. Destro's like, I have to run back down all these stairs and get like, a male to female because I had a female to female and it won't plug in, right?
It's so funny.
But that once again, Hama is thinking about the like physicality of equipment and gear, and adding just a small layer of realism and like frustration and anticipation to the story, right? It's like that's writing. I keep saying this, like, you're not going to see this in an issue of Punisher War Journal or Uncanny X-Men. You're not going to see this in an issue of Punisher War Journal or Uncanny X-Men. At the same time, I also feel like there are fans out there who would see this line as some weird, unnecessary distraction. Like, no, get to the cool stuff, And this is kind of some of the cool stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, I think we've grabbed the mic from you for a bit.
Yeah, I had Dr. Mindbender talking about the dead Snake Eyes, and he just says, "Do you want him stuffed and mounted like we did with before being cut off?" It's just like,
and then Cobra Commander says, "No, just incinerate it."
Yeah,
is that
lovely little kind of insight into the workings of Dr. Mindbender's mind?
Now that's not some kind of reference that we should read into, right?
Yeah, I can't think what it would be referring to in terms of like a continuity. It's just like sort of, there's been something that's happened in the past where
my first thought was Serpentor, which I know probably can't be right.
Well,
obviously it's...
Well, Serpentor was on ice for 40 issues, so maybe.
Well, and there was that line when the goons were like, they're like, "Oh, we replaced the body" or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It could have been something with that. Or it could just be somebody else that had stuffed. It could be Han Solo to Cobra Commander's Jabba the Hutt.
Mark, do you have another...
somebody else that wronged him.
Mark, do you have another favorite line?
That was it from me.
Okay, because
there's another one that I'm going to talk to in a minute about in the Larry Hama colloquialisms, but
I wanted to go back a half step. I think this is an error detected, but I wanted to get your read on it, Mark and Jay. So this is in that final issue, and this is it's page 1, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's the bottom two panels are Destro sort of jumping for that control device, and then he has grabbed the control device. And the middle panel is Gung Ho firing his big machine gun. I'll just walk the tracers right over it. Rat-a-tat-a-tat. And Destro lunges and says, "We've experienced too much. We've expended too much in acquiring this piece of technology for it all to go to waste." And it looks like two of the shots from Gung Ho's machine gun are hitting Destro in the shoulder and on his tricep. But
but Destro, I feel like that suit is kind of like the Michael Keaton Batman suit. Okay. So it's kind of armored.
Okay.
I didn't think of... I mean, I saw it hit it and I was like, damn, Destro's got some badass armor.
Okay, I mean, by this point, Destro, Mars made Cobra Commander's battle armor, which costs as much as a jet and like can take bullets and grenades. So
Yeah.
certainly embedded in this is that Destro is going to wear something safe. But I did feel like in this moment that maybe a Hamism would be like Destro explaining to us, the reader. It's like, with my triple layer Kevlar,
Right.
that I created from Mars Industries. And Mars has an asterisk. And you're like, oh yeah, cool, gear. But it did feel a little bit, it's not like a small pistol. Like it's a two-handed machine gun. Anyway, okay. So if you guys are cool with it, I'm cool with it.
I wonder if that's something that Jurgens put in, or whether that was part of the plot.
Destro's got a full-on neck collar sort of stud, with massive, great big spikes coming out of it as well. That's
in many
not part of the V2, is it?
Well, it's on
No.
it's on the cover of issue. It's on the cover of issue 2, where Dave Dorman has painted. So what Destro's helmet needs, either the helmet has to stop under his jaw, like the chameleon in Spider-Man comics, or Destro needs to have a collar so that the metal part can stop and like there can be black or flesh below it. And in several panels in this story, Jurgens doesn't draw a collar, and so Hi-Fi colors the gold like all the way down his neck, which looks a little weird. So even though those are spikes, I appreciate that Destro, from a design standpoint, has a collar. I don't appreciate the continuity glitch that he only has the collar for some panels.
I was going to say Dave Dorman draws the collar, but they're sort of like the small studs rather than giant spikes that Jurgens adds for whatever reason. Oh, Jay, did you have more favorite lines of dialogue?
I did a couple. I think it was either panel or page issue 3 or 4, number 3, page 14, panels 1 and 2. There's 2 Vipers, and the vent pops open, and one of them says, "Vent cover popped. Cheapoid Arbco Industries junk never fit right to begin with." Oh, that was kind of funny that you got Cobras complaining about stuff that their own company's making, and maybe they don't even know that that's like their own guys. Like they're just like, why do we get all our stuff from Acme?
But also blaming their equipment rather than thinking it might be Snake Eyes. They are under attack. It's not that's not an event popping like that isn't normal, is it? But,
I don't know. That's some cheap stuff if it is.
Yeah.
And then page 17, where Snake Eyes is getting he's attacking a bunch of Cobras. And I think it's Billy that says, "Get him in a crossfire," and the Baroness says, "Get him in any kind of fire."
Classic. Okay, with that great line of dialogue from Hama, let's go Hammer Troporama in Hammer Time.
Stop! Hammer time!
Time to beat the soles of your boots with my face. Sucking chest wounds, red ninjas, brain scanners, rubber oozes, blue ninjas. And then some more sucking chest wounds. Hammer time.
There's, I think, 2 cases of traversing, the angle of traversing some weapons, up and down the Silent Castle. Like, oh, I can reach them and shoot them by pointing these guns up, or we can't reach them because they're too close to the down and our weapons don't go all the way down.
We had, I spotted the gun barrels at the Silent Castle that can't depress low enough to engage the threats. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
In issue number 1, this is in the script. The Joes are driving American-made autos. In the plot, Larry Hama specifically says the Joes are standing by an SUV, a Blazer, a Cherokee, or an Explorer. Joes buy American.
Is it just the script to issue 1 that's in the collection?
It's only like the first 7 pages or so from issue 1 that's in the back. Yeah.
Does page 3 at the top of it say some kind of note that like, Larry, write this terrible dialogue for Scarlet and Snake Eyes? Because page 3, issue 1 is where the whole thing goes off the rails. They're in the car and they start talking, and Stalker says, "I'm not getting between this." I'm like, what am I reading? What is this? Sorry, last vent.
Okay.
Mark, more. I've got a bit of a Hama-ism.
Go on.
So on the second page of issue 2, the Joes and the 2 Ostrikers have pulled up to this boat, this skiff, and we have seen and maybe it's actually more after this story, but we have seen stories where a Joe recognizes someone in a Joe story, either an NPC recognizes a Joe as some kind of military or veteran or expert, or a non-player character recognizes Joe as some kind of military veteran or expert. And there is an instant kinship, and the person helps the Joe, or the Joe helps the person.
Yes, indeed. The last there's so many, so I think this section could go on for a long time. But calling out one more specifically, that the whole thing was in the end a scam from the jugglers, and the only way for the Cobras to believe in the MacGuffin for the plot was for the G.I. Joes to go all out. And I'm thinking of specifically Special Missions number 8, where the CIA agent Anderson had set up the mission to fail from the beginning, and the Joes foiled his plot by actually being too good in that particular one. But in this case, it seems that Destro's last minute shenanigans of moving the desk did thwart the Joe's effectiveness, and did allow the virus to be uploaded into their systems in the end.
I wish that the plot or script to issue 2 was somehow available, because this lone man fishing with a baseball cap on the pier when Destro lands the Condor. Actually, is the Condor a VTOL? I mean, it is here in this scene, but like, do we remember is the toy? Anyway, Destro walks up to this old guy in a baseball cap and a jacket, and he holds up a photo of an All-Striker, and he says, "What did you see?" And Dan Jurgens is drawing this character who we see in close-up and in a medium shot as some kind of very specific person. He has big ears, he has a big nose, he's got old man eyes, and Hama will often in his plot refer to a character as if it's an actor or a person in comics. I don't know if he does this often, but I have seen this in at least one Hama plot, and I wonder if Hama called out in his plot that this should be like a particular person, and Jurgens sort of tried to draw that person, or if he just described him, it's like, oh, it's an old guy, he's got big ears, and then Jurgens obliged him, because I do think Hama wouldn't have left it neutral such that Jurgens would have made up this wonderful character on his own.
But all of that said about you're liking this scene, Tim. Destro's in this Condor, and it's coming down to land, and this guy's noticing. Destro comes up in his weird outfit and his big spiked collar, tracking down these military types that the boatsman, that conceivably this guy's friend, and he's obviously trying to track them down and not up to no good. But he throws them properly under the bus, saying right where what they're in and where they are headed off.
Are you gonna argue with somebody dressed like that? I'm not. Destro comes walking up to me, I give him my wallet and say, "Turn around."
Yeah, part of why I wonder if Hama sort of cast this character as a particular actor is I can imagine, if it's some like character actor from the 50s or the 70s who might play a character who would like I didn't see nothing, crazy man with a metal mask, or sure thing, they went that way. I can see there being an added sort of joke, like, oh, I know who that sort of character is from that old movie. It's also just fun if it's sort of any kind of specific person, because Jurgens draws like a certain kind of standard face for his men, and to draw like a very particular old man fisherman by himself on the pier is great.
Okay, I had some colloquialisms.
There used to be a pudding that was over-egged. You know the pudding. You know the pudding. At first it was British, but then it was Commonwealth. You know the pudding. You know the pudding. But now there's a new player in town, a comic book writer of some renown. He's using real world examples and peppering the issues with lots of samples. It's a Larry Hama colloquialism. He's talking G.I. Joe and all its heroism. Can you guess what it is? Is it something new? Now listen as Larry drops a slice of real life on you.
I have 3 actually. So first up, some nice words and turns of phrases being used here. Myopic. So this is Cobra Commander. Destro is useless. He's mooning over that myopic cow, trying to wean her off the brainwave scanner. So myopic, of course, short-sighted, but such a lovely sounding word, much better than purely just saying short-sighted or square-eyed or whatever else.
Four-eyed.
Jeez,
Cobra Commander, making fun of her.
Then I had goat rope, which was used a couple of
I saw
times.
that.
Have you come across this before?
I haven't seen it, but
I never have.
But Wild Bill is flying the tomahawk, and he's in trouble.
Yeah, it's slang for a real mess, and it sounds like it's also particularly military slang as well. A situation out of control, and possibly derived from a couple of places, but a rodeo event in which competitors attempt to lasso a goat, usually for younger participants. So a bit of a chaotic mess there. We had another one from Wild Bill, Dry Gulch. He said, "Dag nabbit, Wild Bill, you done got yourself dry gulched by a cobra mamba." And my mind, automatically went to it, meaning something slightly ruder than possibly the actual meaning there, sort of thinking humped, if that is that scans it to the American vernacular, but but it's not sexual. It's to ambush with the intent of killing or severely mauling, and the etymology is from the American West, where outlaws often kill people as they pass through a dry gulch, or where cattle rustlers drove stolen animals off the edge of such a gulch. Geographical term, gulch.
Interesting.
Okay, did we have anything else before we yo-jo this bad boy?
I've got one last comment, and I also have my wrap-up thoughts. My one last comment is, do you guys notice that Stalker's uniform, his costume in this arc, it's a variation of his version 1 outfit? He's got a pullover sweater or a button-up. I guess it's not button-up. He has a collar, and then under it is sort of like a turtleneck with a collar, and I like it.
I see.
I like it because it's what I think you should do if it's sort of between the continuities, or sort of an untold story. Like give them their costume, but change a couple things. At the same time, it's all only green, and I sure wish that either the shirt under his shirt or the collar under his collar was a different color. I want just a little accent, because it's like the only character that gets a costume that's all one color is Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes version 1, and then everyone else, you have to have a little accent. But I'm ready for Yojo. Idge.
You want to go first, Tim? Then continue on. Continue riding that train up until the point at which the Dreadnoks have sabotaged it.
This is really hard. 5.
It's a low one.
And I've said so much, so I do have a wrap up thought, but I'm gonna just, rather than sort of restate anything, 5.
Okay, Jay.
I was gonna say 5 until we started recording, and then the more that I kind of flipped through it, and I really got more into the dialogue. That doesn't do that much to save the story, so I'm gonna go with a 6.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat with you, Jay. That it's difficult to put a finger on exactly why this doesn't work. it does sort of sound like, run through like a greatest hits. There's a lot of great characters.
Yeah.
We see a roll call of the main cobras and some interesting locations, and but something just sort of doesn't quite hit the high notes. Talking it through, I probably am raising my my enjoyment of it almost a little bit, just sort of realizing how much great dialogue there is there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'm in the same boat as it being about 6.
That's a nice comment about talking it through with two other people, because very small undercurrent when I read this originally, right? This story had been previewed in Diamond Previews. Diamond Previews is the catalog that Diamond publishes, and this is what comic book stores have historically ordered from. And as a customer, you can get a copy too. And this got previewed in Diamond Previews. I think they did a very small interview with Hama and then showed 2 or 3 pages. This is when you order it, and it's going to come out 2 months later. And when it actually came out, a very small undercurrent. I felt sort of alone, right? Because G.I. Joe was back, but and Hama was back, but this wasn't working, and sort of, who could I turn to? So part of why I said so many times at the beginning of this recording and before, I have so much to say, I can't wait to talk to you about this, is that I've always really wanted to chop this story up and talk about it, because there is a lot to like. My sort of wrap-up thought is twofold. One, if you just cut out the final 2 pages, it would work better for me, and I can see it definitely working better for Jay. The ending would be a little abrupt, but overall, doing this kind of story, Marvel did it with X Factor Forever. They got Louise Simonson to come back and write sort of one more X Factor story, sort of around the time of the end of her run. There's this X-Men monthly comic happening right now called X-Men Legends. In fact, there's going to be 2 upcoming issues in a month or 2 from Larry Hama. But these arcs, they're getting writers who did X-Men runs in the 80s and 90s to come back and do a 2-issue story set during their run to maybe answer a question that never got answered or fill in a hole. And I don't think X-Men Legends has been great so far. And I think the difference is, if you have a Larry Hama start at issue 156 and you give him a wide berth and say, sort of do whatever you want, or again, this analogy of why don't you continue this thing from many years ago, right? What was that X-Men? Was it X-Men Forever, where Chris Claremont got to write 2 more years, right, after his infamous X-Men #3, and then he quit, right? And Tom Grummett drew the whole run. It's what he might have done next. And that was just an ongoing monthly. I don't think they said you have 12 issues or you have 12 issues and 12 more issues. So the way that to compromise, right? Let's say that I don't have a magic wand. It's not like, Blayock, just hire Hama instead of yourself, or Blayock, just let Hama go for 50 or 100 issues. That's not realistic. But 2 things. One, this arc should have been 5 or 6 issues if it was going to have this much stuff. 2, what really needed to happen, and I don't think is in any way unrealistic with sort of the parameters of Devil's Due in 2001, 2, and 3, have Hama come back and do this 2 or 3 more times. So tell a story that's in 95, tell a story that's in 98, tell a story that's in 99, and have a couple steps to bridge out of the Marvel run and into the IDW run. And besides Hama's difficulty in writing this way, here's your outline, follow it. But also, you have to get to this end point. It's I gotta have Billy go off so he can come back at the beginning of the Devil's Due run. I have to have Storm Shadow kind of still zapped by the brainwave scanner so he can come back and struggle at the beginning of the Devil's Due run. All the stuff with Snake Eyes and Baroness. Yes, other people want to write G.I. Joe. That's what Frontline is for. But man, this book is selling like crazy in 2001, 2002. Have Hama come back a couple times so this stuff can spread out. That's my realistic compromise. But I'm also happy that Hama's just writing an ongoing G.I. Joe for another publisher right now.
Yeah, and I think the precondition, I think, maybe he might have come back if this experience wasn't so painful for him. I think the precondition for him coming back and doing more for Devil's Due, and specifically Storm Shadow, was that he would just be allowed to do his own thing.
Good point.
Cool. So that was Frontline issues 1 to 4. Interesting discussion, and look forward to seeing what we make of the next arc in Frontline. But before we head off, let's have a quick round of innuendo.
Attention. At this moment, you are now listening to
Talking Innuendo.
If you are offended by words like
sucking, flesh wound, willy, Pete, balls, crystal balls, hypno shield,
whatever, take the tape out now. This is not a pop album. And by the way, suck my
grandmother's brick in a Prada handbag. So if you're in the right frame of mind, specifically my frame of mind, a lot of G.I. Joe names can sound a little bit dirty, so can I get through a list of 5 G.I. Joe names without making my co-hosts titter? Jay, unmute yourself in preparation, please. Okay, let's go. Windmill. Colonel Breakoff. Slipstream's Conquest. Ding 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 ding.
Colonel Breakoff was a good build up to that.
Man, I've been looking forward to Colonel Breakoff for months.
You can't lose with Conquest, though.
It's been a while. Jay's hey listeners, Jay's seeing Snake Eyes right after this recording. So, and actually so am I a couple hours from now. So we should sign off.
Yeah. So so next time on Disavowed we'll continue on G.I. Joe Frontline 5 to 8. Over on the regular show, we're continuing to cover Era as it comes out. So wrapping up Murder by Assassination with part 5, and then moving on to the spotlights after beyond that. Where can people find you guys? Tim?
realamericanbook.com.
And why not delve into the archives and have a look at some of that Dave Dorman art that you've got featured on your site while you're there. Jay, what about you?
Break Room Sketches on Facebook.
And you can find the site on all of the usual places. talkingjoe.co.uk is the website that has links to all of those places. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, contact details, etc., as well as links to the YouTube versions of this show. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/talkingjoe. So a big thanks to all of our backers, Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, and Justin, who are getting early access to episodes as well as some exclusive content. There's no minimum subscription, so if you're enjoying this and want to chip in and pay off some of the running costs, then that would be muchly appreciated. And that's us done. But remember,
nobody beats Talking Joe!
A real American podcast!
With the guy from England. Later, wankers.
Wow, that's embarrassing, but I like it.